Well, the April 2022 Household Affordability Index, which tracks food price data from 44 supermarkets and 30 butcheries in Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, Pietermaritzburg and Springbok, shows that in April 2022, the average cost of the household food basket is 4,542 rands 93 cents. Now let's discuss this. We are now joined via Zoom by Mervyn Abrahams, Program Coordinator for the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. Mervyn, thank you so much for your time. Well, it's no wonder I can't read that figure because it's so high. If it's not fuel prices, it's food prices. Now, the cost of food in this country has increased 6% in April 2022 over the same month in the previous year. I mean, the question is, are things going to get any easier anytime soon?
So good afternoon, Renata, and good afternoon to all your viewers. There is a direct connection between increasing fuel prices and increasing food prices, because a major input into the food production chain is in fact fuel, whether it is fertilizers when the farmers have to start planting, whether it is transporting food from the warehouses to the retailers, logistics are involved, plastic is involved in packaging, and so there's a direct connection. And so when fuel prices increase as massively as it has, then we see also food prices increase.
So, just to recap back to that intro, we're basically saying that the average cost of the household food basket is 4,542 rands. A lot of South Africans don't even earn this a month. So what then happens to those poor of the poorest South Africans that we're talking about? So they basically not spending enough money on food. They're not sustaining themselves.
Exactly. And so we know that less than 50%, or more than 50% of South Africa's workers earn at the level of a national minimum wage or less, which is 3,600 rand. So if you're in that situation, what people are telling us is they are cutting back on the amount of meals they eat. They're also cutting back on the quality of the food they buy. They buy cheaper food, and then they eat less meals. And that is their survival strategy. But of course, that survival strategy is actually bad for South Africa's economic growth in the long term, because it would make our population much more open to disease. We will be spending more money on hospitals and clinics. Educational outcomes will be lower, and economic productivity is likely to be lower going forward. So they all have a major impact, not only in food consumption, but also in what happens later on in education, in health, and in economic development.
I mean, at this rate, what are some of the immediate actions and steps that government can then, just to do in terms of solutions and look into, particularly if you look at those households that are barely surviving as you and I speak?
So really the households that are barely surviving are by and large households where people earn a national minimum wage, or households dependent on social grants. Those are the first avenue, of course, that needs to be strengthened. It is also important to keep down the price of these food increases and not instituting the levy to tomorrow night. Giving us another 4 to 5 months reprieve will help, actually, because it will mean that it will be cheaper for farmers and cheaper for logistics, and hopefully we will see a reduction on the shelf of food products.
You were mentioning just some of the drivers that have led us to where we are currently and why we're seeing these increases, not only from a food perspective, but also from the fuel perspective. How much of the war in Ukraine has dealt us this blow, particularly on food prices, in this country? And are we likely to see a change? I mean, if we just look at the intra-Africa trade as an example, what are some of the solutions that lie there?
Yes, so actually you are absolutely correct. one of the big triggers for the current spike in food prices has to do with the war in Russia-Ukraine, because we cannot get the wheat and the sunflower and the corn that is actually in their silos, sitting there, rotting. We cannot get that out through the ports because of the war. And then Indonesia has banned palm oil, which is a major input, not just into vegetable oil, but also into soaps and other things. So there are major geopolitical things. So what this suggests is that the South African economy and our food system is overexposed to international crises, be it a pandemic or be it a geopolitical crisis. Can we begin to build greater resilience locally and continentally? Can we begin to produce our own fertilizers, for instance? Can we have better trade around fuel from oil-producing countries in Africa selling to South Africa? That is something that we need to really look as we go forward to build resilience, not only for us, but for the continent.
And Mervyn, just on a recent thing that is currently happening now, we are commemorating Child Protection Week, which started yesterday, but just in the past 3 years alone, 2,818 children under the age of 5 have died of malnutrition in hospitals in South Africa. For me, that sounds like a crisis when we can't even feed our most vulnerable, our children.
Exactly, Unati, exactly. And the fact that that statistic is now in the public space, it is a shame, really, in a country that is food secure at a national level. We're exporting food, and that we cannot feed our children is really a major blight on our nation. I mean, when we look, for instance, at what it costs to feed a child, according to our statistics, it costs to feed a child roughly around 813 Rand. And when you look at the child support grant, it is 460 Rand. So you cannot even, for a poor family, cannot even feed their children a proper diet on the child support grant. So when are we going to learn that it is important to set the child support grant at the level of the food poverty line? That is not something that is that we can't think out. It is so self-evident, and yet we have not done that.
Absolutely. Mervyn, I think a lot of people would also feel and appreciate your frustration. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mervyn Abrahams is a program coordinator for the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group.